Have you ever felt like your life is one step away from spiraling out of control? Like no matter how hard you work or how smart you are, one careless word, one emotional outburst, one impulsive purchase, or one sleepless night of overthinking is all it takes to unravel everything you've built? Most people think the solution is to control the world around them, but the Stoics saw through that illusion. They knew the real battlefield isn't out there. It's within. You don't need to control the world. You need to control four forces that quietly shape every decision you make: your mouth, your mood, your money, and your mind. Miss any one of them, and life will remind you, gently if you're lucky, brutally if you're not. This isn't about perfection. It's about power. The kind of power that doesn't shout or chase, but builds trust, builds clarity, builds freedom. Because true freedom never begins with what you own. It begins with what you can govern. Not your boss, not your past, not their opinion of you, but your own choices in moments that seem small but define everything. In this video, we're not chasing hype or hacks. We're returning to something older, quieter, stronger, a path of mastery through restraint, simplicity through discipline, peace through power. So, if something in you is ready to stop reacting and start reclaiming, stay with me. This might just be the moment everything begins to change. Number 1. Control your mouth before it controls your life. Have you ever said something in a moment of anger and instantly wished you could take it back? Maybe it slipped out faster than your better judgment could catch it. Maybe it was true, but not necessary. And maybe deep down, you knew that saying it wouldn't fix the situation, it would just feed the fire. That's the quiet regret most people carry, not over what they failed to express, but over what they failed to restrain. Because words, once spoken, don't disappear. They echo, they define you, and sometimes they destroy more than you intended. The Stoics understood this better than anyone. Marcus Aurelius warned, "Let your speech be the reflection of your integrity, not your impulse." Words are powerful not because they're loud, but because they shape perception. They build or destroy relationships. They influence minds. They expose your discipline or your lack of it. And in the modern world, where everyone rushes to speak, tweet, comment, argue, and react, restraint has become a rare superpower. Let me tell you a story. There was a man named Aaron. Quiet, intelligent, respected. He had worked at the same company for nearly a decade. Never flashy, never loud. But everyone knew when Aaron spoke, it mattered. He didn't waste words. He didn't speak just to be heard. He spoke to clarify, to guide. That's why he was trusted. Then one day, something shifted. In a leadership meeting, a younger colleague was chosen to present a project that Aaron had helped build behind the scenes. It wasn't jealousy, really. It was frustration. The delivery was rushed. Some key ideas were missing. And midway through the presentation, Aaron snapped. He cut in, his voice sharp, his words loaded. He didn't shout, but the heat in his tone made the entire room go silent. The worst part? He was right. Every point he made was valid. But it didn't matter. From that day forward, the way people looked at him changed. He wasn't seen as steady anymore. He was seen as volatile, not dangerous, just unpredictable. And trust, once cracked, rarely returns in full. That's the lesson. You can win the argument and still lose the room. You can speak the truth and still damage your integrity if the delivery is rooted in ego rather than purpose. The Stoics taught that words are not weapons, they're tools, and tools must be used with precision, not emotion. A man who cannot control his tongue when provoked is not strong. He's exposed, He's reactive, and when you're reactive, you're easy to manipulate. So why do so many people lose control of their words? Because they confuse honesty with urgency. Because they think speaking quickly makes them sound confident. Because they fear silence more than stupidity. But real power isn't in how fast you speak. It's in how thoughtfully you choose your words. It's in the pauses. It's in the silence between your thoughts. Discipline speaks volumes, even when your mouth stays closed. There's another angle here too. Think about your self-talk. The things you say to yourself when no one's listening. Are your words building your identity or breaking it down? If you constantly tell yourself you're not enough, not ready, not capable, that becomes the reality you live in. You rehearse weakness. You condition your mind to obey defeat. Seneca wrote, "What you think of yourself is far more important than what others think of you." And the words you speak to others and to yourself are a mirror of that self-concept. You can't lie to your soul with your tongue. It knows the truth. So if your words are cruel, reckless, sarcastic, or defeated, it's not just the world that suffers. You do. There's a woman I once coached who always apologized in every sentence. "Sorry, I just wanted to add. Sorry, I don't mean to interrupt. Sorry, it's probably a dumb idea." It wasn't humility. It was a quiet form of self-erasure. When we worked together to strip out the unnecessary apologies, something shifted. Her voice became clearer. Her ideas stronger. People started to listen. Why? Because she began to speak like someone who believed she deserved to be heard. And here's the paradox. The quieter your mind becomes, the more powerful your words become. Not because you speak more, but because you speak less. And when you finally speak, people lean in. Why? Because your words aren't random. They're earned. They come from reflection, not reaction. And in a world full of noise, that kind of clarity becomes magnetic. So the next time you feel the urge to clap back, to vent, to prove a point, to dominate a conversation, ask yourself 3 Stoic questions. Is this necessary? Is this helpful? Is this the right way? If the answer is no, you don't need to bite your tongue. You need to rise above the impulse. You don't need to say something clever. You need to say something meaningful or say nothing at all. Because silence, when chosen deliberately, carries more weight than 1,000 empty words. And what happens when you master this, when you truly learn to govern your speech? You earn something the undisciplined will never have: respect without demand, presence without noise, power without posturing. You walk into a room and speak without having to prove. You guide without raising your voice. You influence without manipulation. And most of all, you protect your peace because you no longer give it away with every careless word. Let me ask you something personal. What would your relationships look like if you only spoke when it was worth it? What would your career look like if your words carried weight instead of volume? What would your self-worth feel like if your inner voice respected you instead of doubting you? You already know the answer. You've already imagined the difference. And that tells me one thing: you're ready. Ready to stop leaking power through your mouth. Ready to stop feeding the fire of reactivity. Ready to build something more lasting than a good comeback or a loud opinion. Because in the end, you will not be remembered for how much you spoke. You will be remembered for whether your words meant something or nothing at all. Speak less. Mean more, and let your silence become louder than most people's shouting ever could. Now that you've seen the danger of a reckless tongue, it's time we look at the second battlefield, one that's even more slippery, more subtle, and more silently destructive. Your mood. Because if you can't control how you feel, you'll never control how you live. Let's dive in. Number 2. Control your mind before it shapes your reality. Have you ever felt defeated before anything even happened? Not because the world struck first, but because your own thoughts whispered, "Why even try?" That quiet voice in your head that sounds like truth, but feels like fear. That's where most battles begin. And tragically, that's also where most people surrender. Not on the battlefield of life, but in the silence of their own minds. Before they ever take the shot, they've already convinced themselves they'll miss. That's not fate, that's an untrained mind. The Stoics saw this long before psychology gave it names. Epictetus said it clearly. It's not things that disturb us, but our judgment about things. Your mind is not simply reacting to the world, it's interpreting it, coloring it. And if that interpretation is shaped by fear, resentment, self-doubt, or past wounds, then even peace will feel like danger, and even love will feel like a threat. The mind, when left undisciplined, becomes a tyrant dressed in your own voice. Let me tell you a story. A man named Carl worked in marketing for over a decade. Smart, dependable, well-liked. One day, due to budget cuts, he was let go. Not because of performance, just bad timing. At first, he told himself it was temporary. He updated his resume, reached out to friends, followed job boards. But week by week, doubt crept in. He started thinking, maybe I'm too old. Maybe no one's hiring. Maybe this is the end. Those weren't facts. They were assumptions. But the more he repeated them, the more real they felt. Months passed. He stopped applying. Friends sent him leads. He ignored them. He stopped replying. Not because he didn't want the job, but because his mind had already written the ending, failure. Not because the world had shut him out, but because he had locked himself in. The story you believe becomes the story you live. And Carl's mind had become a cage of his own construction. The truth is, most people don't lose in life because of what happens to them. They lose because of what they allow to happen inside their head. The mind, when left unguarded, fills itself with doubt, noise, assumptions, comparisons, regrets, projections. It becomes a cluttered battlefield where fear wears the mask of logic and emotion pretends to be truth. So how do you take back control? First, by remembering what Marcus Aurelius practiced every morning: mental preparation. He wrote, "You will meet people who are selfish, arrogant, deceitful. Prepare your mind not to be disturbed by them." Notice that. He didn't say, change the people. He said, train your mind not to be shaken. Because strength doesn't come from controlling the world. It comes from controlling what the world does to your inner peace. A Stoic doesn't wait for peace. He builds it. And it starts by filtering thoughts the same way you filter what you eat or drink. Just because a thought shows up in your head doesn't mean it belongs there. Just because you feel anxious doesn't mean you're in danger. Just because you think someone doesn't like you doesn't make it true. The problem is, most people never interrogate their thoughts. They just obey them. And when you obey every thought, you stop being the thinker. You become the slave. Let me ask you this. Have you ever felt anxious over something that hasn't even happened? Have you ever stayed awake at night, playing scenarios in your head that never came true? That's not reality. That's mental autopilot. That's the cost of letting fear run your inner world unchecked. Now picture someone else, a Stoic. He wakes up in the same chaotic world as everyone else. Same news, same emails, same problems. But he chooses what enters. He chooses where to place his focus. When negativity knocks, he doesn't invite it in for coffee. He watches it, questions it, filters it, and if it doesn't serve him, he lets it pass. That's the right way, not the easy way, but the disciplined way, the intentional way, because the mind, left unmanaged, will always drift toward comfort, distraction, and fear. But a trained mind, now that's a weapon. That's clarity. That's freedom. You don't have to pretend everything's fine. Stoicism isn't about denial. It's about discernment. You don't silence the storm by pretending it's sunny. You simply stop giving the storm your steering wheel. Control your mind by asking, is this thought useful? Is it helping me move forward? Or is it keeping me stuck in a past I already survived? There's a woman I met once named Leah. She struggled with social anxiety. Every time she was in a group, her thoughts would spiral. They think I'm awkward. They think I'm boring. I shouldn't have said that. She wasn't being judged by others. She was being attacked by her own commentary. So we worked on one practice, journaling the truth. Not the fear, not the fiction, but what actually happened. I spoke, they listened, they smiled. Bit by bit, her mind started building a new script, and with it, a new self. That's the power of choosing the right way to think, not the comfortable way, not the loud way, the right way, the path of reason, reflection, responsibility. The Stoics had many tools for this. They journaled not to vent, but to gain insight. They meditated not to escape thought, but to observe it. They read not for entertainment, but to sharpen their judgment. They practiced solitude not to be alone, but to clean the room of their mind. You can do the same. Turn down the noise, cut the junk content, remove the constant stimulation. Your mind is not a trash bin. Stop throwing unverified thoughts into it and expecting clarity. Because when your mind is clear, your life becomes clearer. You stop reacting to things that don't matter. You stop spiraling over assumptions. You stop believing every fearful voice that pops up, and you start choosing your story, choosing your focus, choosing your energy. And that's the beginning of real power. So the next time your mind tries to convince you that you're stuck, hopeless, or broken, pause. Don't obey. Observe. Ask, is this fear or is this fact? And then choose the stronger thought. Choose the thought that serves the future you're building, because every war is won or lost in the mind before a single action is ever taken. And when you master your mind, you become unshakable, not because the world got easier, but because your thoughts stopped making it harder. Not because you silenced fear completely, but because you stopped giving it the mic. That's not coldness. That's maturity. That's stoicism. That's self-respect. You don't need to control every thought. You just need to stop letting every thought control you. Because you are not the emotion. You are the one who chooses what to do with it. And now that you've seen how thoughts can imprison or empower you, it's time we explore the next force that quietly shapes your fate. One that shows up in your posture, your energy, your words, and your outcomes, your mood. Because if you can't hold your emotional center, the world will keep knocking you off course. Let's go deeper. Number 3. Control your mood, or it will control everything. Have you ever had a day that went sideways from the moment it started? Maybe it was something small. You spilled coffee on your shirt. Someone cut you off in traffic. An email hit the wrong nerve. And suddenly you weren't just irritated. You were carrying that mood into every room you walked into, every word you spoke, every decision you made. One small trigger. One moment of emotion, and your whole day, maybe even your whole week, started unraveling. We've all been there. That silent spiral where everything seems heavier, everyone seems more annoying, and nothing feels right. Not because the world changed, but because your inner state did. The Stoics had a name for that loss of control. They called it enslavement. Not to a person, not to a system, but to your own emotions. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "You have power over your mind, not outside events." Realize this, and you will find strength. Notice what he didn't say. He didn't say, don't feel. He didn't say, be a robot. He said, realize. Realize that emotion is part of life, but giving it the keys to your behavior, your words, your decisions, that's a choice. And if you don't make that choice consciously, your mood will make it for you. Let me share a story. Jason had been unemployed for 6 months. Finally, a company reached out. Big opportunity, the kind of role that could shift his whole trajectory. On the day of the interview, everything seemed to go wrong. He overslept. Coffee spilled on his shirt. Traffic jam made him late. The receptionist made him wait 20 minutes. By the time he sat in front of the hiring manager, Jason was tense, his face tight, his tone clipped. His answers sounded defensive, even though he knew the material well. He didn't smile. He didn't connect. The manager thanked him politely. He never heard back. He didn't lose the job because of his resume. He lost it because of his energy, because he walked into a life-changing moment with a mood that didn't belong there. And that's the hidden danger. When you don't control your mood, it doesn't stay in one place. It leaks. It spreads. It stains everything it touches. Conversations, opportunities, relationships, reputation. And here's the worst part. Most people don't even realize it's happening. They just say, I'm having a bad day, without ever asking, do I want this one bad moment to write the story of my entire day? A Stoic doesn't pretend everything is fine. He doesn't deny emotion. He recognizes it. He names it. And then he chooses not to act from it. Seneca said, no man is more unhappy than he who never faces adversity, for he is not permitted to prove himself. Adversity isn't the enemy, but the way you carry your mood through it can be. Your mood is like the weather, temporary, shifting, often unpredictable. But just like the rain doesn't cancel the day, a heavy mood doesn't have to derail your purpose. That is, if you choose to respond the right way, not the impulsive way, not the self-indulgent way, but the way that honors the man you're trying to become. There's a simple Stoic practice for this. It's called emotional labeling. When a mood hits you, pause, breathe, then name it. I feel anxious. I feel frustrated. I feel dismissed. Just naming the emotion creates distance, and in that distance, something powerful is born. Perspective. The ability to choose your next move, instead of being dragged by the current. Jason learned that too, just later than he wished. He started keeping a small notebook. Every time something triggered him, he'd write one sentence. What would the stronger version of me do right now? That question changed him, because it reminded him that he had a stronger version. And that version was built not on feelings, but on principles. Let's be real. You're not always going to feel calm, confident, motivated, or peaceful. But you don't need to feel a certain way to act a certain way. You don't need to wait for the storm to pass to move forward. You just need to train your response. Train yourself to pause before reacting. Train yourself to speak gently, even when you're irritated. Train yourself to smile when nothing external demands it. That's not fake. That's control. That's choosing your mood rather than being chosen by it. The right way is not about being cheerful all the time. It's about refusing to let a moment of emotion cost you something permanent. Your mood doesn't just affect how you feel. It affects how you lead, how you listen, how you love, how you show up when it matters most. Another woman I worked with, Mia, had a habit of shutting down when she was overwhelmed. She wouldn't yell or cry. She'd just withdraw, emotionally disappear from conversations, meetings, even her own thoughts. We worked on one shift. When she felt the shutdown coming, she'd find one thing in her environment she was grateful for: a cup of tea, a soft light, a memory of something kind. Gratitude and anger can't hold hands at the same time. And little by little, she started anchoring herself, not in fake positivity, but in grounded presence. You can do the same. Because emotional mastery isn't about suppression. It's about choice. It's about training your nervous system to respond like a warrior, not a victim. To hold your center even when the world pulls at you. To keep your dignity when everything around you is chaos. That's the right way. It won't always feel natural, but it will feel powerful, and over time, it becomes who you are. Now, before we move on, let me ask you something. What if every bad mood in the past 30 days cost you a small piece of peace, or trust, or opportunity? What if every sharp word, every passive-aggressive reply, every cold silence added up to something you can't track, but still live with? Because that's how moods work. They may be invisible, but their consequences aren't. And you have a choice right now. Not to be perfect, not to fake joy, but to begin practicing presence. To ask yourself in tense moments, not "how do I feel?" but "how do I want to show up?" So here's your reminder. The next time you feel that emotional wave rising, pause, label it, breathe, ask, what would the man of principle do right now? Then do that. Even if it's hard, especially if it's hard. Because if you don't control your mood will control your words, your tone, your posture, your reputation. And no sorry will undo the damage if you keep living under emotional autopilot. This isn't about chasing a perfect day. It's about becoming a person who doesn't need one to lead with strength. Train your mind to stay calm while everything else shakes. That's the kind of power no one can take. If this message hits you right where it needs to, comment stillness. Let it be a promise to yourself. And if you're ready to keep training your inner strength the right way, subscribe now so you never miss the next lesson. Because up next, we move to another battlefield most people ignore until it's too late: your relationship with money. And I'm not just talking about dollars and digits. I'm talking about desire, discipline, and the quiet decisions that either build freedom or destroy it. Let's keep going. Number 4, control your money or it will quietly control you. Have you ever looked at your bank account and felt a weight you couldn't name? Not because there wasn't enough, but because somewhere deep down you knew you weren't in control. You weren't broke, but you were leaking peace, power, purpose. Because money, when unmanaged, doesn't just create financial stress. It creates spiritual fatigue. Every swipe, every impulse buy, every time you say, "I deserve this," without asking what it costs tomorrow, you're not just spending cash, you're spending clarity. The Stoics didn't talk about money the way we do today. They weren't checking crypto charts or calculating interest rates, but they understood something timeless. Attachment is the real debt. Epictetus said it clearly: wealth consists not in having great possessions, but in having few wants. Because the man who always wants more will always feel poor. And the man who can't say no to himself will always live under the illusion of freedom while wearing invisible chains. Let me introduce you to Leo. From the outside, he looked like he had it all. Nice car, designer clothes, fancy dinners. On social media, his life looked effortless. But behind the curtain, it was different. Credit cards maxed, rent late, bank account scraping zero. Why? Because everything he bought was for someone else's approval. He wasn't trying to impress strangers. He was trying to silence his own insecurity. Every purchase was a distraction. Every item a bandage on a wound called "I'm not enough." And that's how most people live, not beyond their means, but beneath their discipline. They don't have a money problem. They have a decision problem, a delayed consequence problem, a reward now, regret later problem. They trade power for presentation, freedom for image, and they call it self-care. But it's not. It's self-sabotage, dressed in luxury. The modern world doesn't enslave you with shackles. It enslaves you with payments, car payments, subscription payments, ego payments, mental payments. You don't build peace while building debt. You don't build a future by destroying your present for comfort. If you want strength, you need to earn it the right way, with restraint, clarity, and long-term thinking. Ask yourself this: have you ever shopped just because you were bored? Ever spent money to feel a rush, to feel in control, to escape a bad day? That's not purchasing. That's emotional spending. And it leaves a mark deeper than a receipt. It leaves you dependent. Not on stuff, but on the feeling you chase when you spend. The Stoic doesn't chase that feeling. He builds a foundation, slowly, quietly, intentionally. A Stoic saves not to hoard, but to protect. He budgets not to restrict joy, but to preserve freedom. He says no to short-term pleasure, because he's building something bigger than comfort. He's building independence. And that's the difference between a consumer and a builder. One escapes, the other plans. Now let's be clear, money is not evil. Obsession is. Dependence is. When you live to impress, you live in stress. When you spend to distract, you stay distracted. When you buy things to feel like someone, you forget you already are someone. And if your mood controls your spending, then your money is already in the hands of your emotions. Let me tell you about a woman named Claire. She didn't make 6 figures. She wasn't financially flashy, but she had something most people with money don't have: peace. Because every dollar she spent had a purpose. Every dollar she saved had a direction. She wasn't rich, but she was free. Free from the anxiety that comes with debt. Free from the pressure to compete. Free from the mental weight of always chasing the next thing. Her secret: she asked 3 questions before every purchase. Is this supporting the person I'm becoming? Is this a reward or a reaction? Will this matter in 5 years? That's the right way. Not because it's rigid, but because it's rooted in purpose. And the truth is, every dollar is a vote. A quiet vote for the life you're building. If you vote for distraction, you get chaos. If you vote for discipline, you get freedom. The Stoic doesn't need applause. He doesn't need to show off. His wealth is in his choices, his control, his ability to say, I could, but I won't, because he knows what he's building, and he won't trade the foundation for a fleeting thrill. So what are you building? A life of options, or a life of obligations, a future that can weather storms, or a future that collapses with one emergency? That's the test. Not how much you make, but how much of what you make is yours to keep. And more importantly, how much of what you spend actually reflects your values. Every financial decision is a conversation with your future self. And if your future self could speak, would they say, thank you, or what were you thinking? A man who doesn't control his money will always be controlled by someone who does. A man who doesn't own his budget will be owned by his debts. And a man who can't delay gratification will spend his life chasing shiny objects while never building anything that lasts. That's why the Stoic path isn't about getting rich. It's about becoming rich in discipline, in intention, in self-respect. Because there is no stoicism without self-reliance, and there is no self-reliance if you're at war with your own wallet. So let's bring it home. You don't need to be wealthy. You need to be wise. You don't need a new credit card. You need a new conviction. And you don't need to prove anything to anyone. You just need to stop betraying the person you're becoming. The next time you reach for your card, ask, is this love or lack, strength or reaction, the right way or the easy escape? Because financial freedom doesn't begin with numbers. It begins with a choice to stop outsourcing your peace to pleasure. A choice to build quietly while others flex loudly. A choice to protect the life you're building instead of sabotaging it one swipe at a time. Control your money, not to be rich, but to be free. And when you master that, you'll discover something even more powerful, the strength to walk through life steady, clear, and unshaken. Which brings us to the final frontier, the one most people never conquer. The self, the inner architect, the silent saboteur. It's time we face the part of us that either builds discipline or breaks it. Let's move forward. Number 5. Control yourself or be owned by everything. Have you ever felt like your life was slipping through your fingers, not because someone took it from you, but because you gave it away piece by piece? Maybe it wasn't one big decision. Maybe it was a dozen little ones. A conversation where you exploded, a purchase you couldn't afford, a morning lost to distractions, a week swallowed by overthinking, a mood that shaped a month. You look back and realize you weren't being attacked. You were just undisciplined. And in the absence of discipline, everything else took control. We live in a world obsessed with freedom, but most people chase a counterfeit version of it. They want the appearance of freedom, not the responsibility. They want to do whatever they want, whenever they want, and still expect peace, clarity, and power. But as the Stoics taught, true freedom doesn't come from doing whatever you feel. It comes from doing what's right, especially when it's hard. Seneca said, "No man is free who is not master of himself." That's the standard. Let me show you what the opposite looks like. Take Anthony. He was the kind of man who reacted to everything. A comment from a stranger, he lashed back. An unexpected bill, he panicked. A missed opportunity, he blamed someone else. On the surface, he seemed bold, fiery even. But underneath all that noise was fear. Fear of being seen as weak. Fear of losing control. Fear of not being respected. So he overcompensated. Spoke louder. Spent more, tried to impress everyone, but nothing worked. Because deep down, Anthony didn't trust himself. And when you don't trust your own discipline, you're forced to chase validation to cover the void. That's where most people get it wrong. They think yelling makes them strong. They think spending makes them successful. They think reacting makes them real. But it's the opposite. If anyone can push your buttons, you have no inner power. If your money moves every time your mood swings, you have no financial freedom. If your mornings are ruled by emotion and your nights spiral into chaos, you have no peace. You're not living, you're leaking, and it doesn't matter how much you achieve on the outside. If you're fragile on the inside, life will find the cracks. The Stoic walks differently. He doesn't chase luxury. He chases alignment. He doesn't flex in public. He strengthens in private. He doesn't explode, not because he's suppressing rage, but because he's mastered the storm within. He knows that true confidence is quiet. Real power doesn't need to shout. And the strongest man in the room is the one who can remain calm when the room is losing its mind. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this, and you will find strength." That's not just a quote. That's a mirror. Because the moment you start taking ownership, not just of your actions, but of your impulses, you begin to transform. You stop being the victim of your emotions. You become the architect of your character. Let me ask you a question. What would your life look like if your emotions didn't hijack your mornings? If your thoughts didn't trap you every night? If your words matched your wisdom, not your wounds? if your spending reflected your values, not your vanity. That's not a fantasy. That's what happens when you start doing things the right way. And yes, it's hard. It means saying no when your ego says yes. It means walking away from drama when your pride wants war. It means budgeting not just your money, but your energy, your attention, your reactions. But that's where power is found, not in comfort, in control. Because here's the truth no one wants to admit. Most people aren't tired because life is hard. They're tired because they keep losing internal battles. Every unfiltered word, every emotional purchase, every wasted hour, it all adds up. And soon, they're not just exhausted, they're enslaved. But the Stoic knows better. He sees discipline not as a prison, but as protection. He doesn't need external rules. He lives by internal ones. He understands that control isn't about perfection. It's about ownership. He doesn't need to dominate others. He masters himself. And because of that, no one can touch his peace. You don't need to become emotionless. You need to become unshakable. You don't need to control the world. You need to control your mouth, your mood, your money, and your mind. Because when you govern those four, the rest of your life falls into place. Not magically, but deliberately, slowly, strongly. And that's how you walk into any room, not seeking approval, not demanding attention, but radiating stability. Because you don't need to prove anything anymore. You are rooted. The paradox? Most men never learn this. They keep waiting for the world to change, for the boss to respect them, for the partner to understand, for the economy to improve. But freedom doesn't come from the outside. It begins the moment you stop needing to be rescued and realize the only one who can save you is the version of you who has discipline. The world doesn't owe you peace. Life won't hand you strength. But every moment gives you a chance to choose. You don't need more motivation. You need more ownership. You need to stop outsourcing your life to your impulses. You need to stop saying, "This is just how I am," and start saying, "This is what I choose to become." So here's your final test. Look in the mirror and ask, am I ruled by my mood? Do I leak power through careless words? Am I disciplined when I have money, or just reckless with more resources? Is my mind helping me or hurting me? If even one of those questions hits hard, good. That means you're ready. Because pain is the price of awakening. And clarity only comes when you stop hiding behind excuses and start building the life you claim to want. Start small, speak with more purpose, think with more clarity, feel with more balance, spend with more intention. Control those four and watch your life bend to your will. Because in the end, the man who can control himself can't be controlled by anything else. Not fear, not failure, not temptation, not time. He becomes the kind of man who walks with presence, speaks with weight, gives with intention, and moves with peace. That's not luck. That's not chance. That's the result of choosing the right way, every day, even when no one's watching. This is the Stoic path to inner power, and the man who walks it doesn't chase freedom. He becomes it. But understanding the power of inner control is only the beginning. Because once you've seen how easily your mood can shape your day, how your spending can leak your peace, how your words can build or destroy, and how your thoughts can quietly govern your future, then comes the harder question: what do I actually do about it? Knowing that discipline is the path is one thing, walking it is another. That's where most men get lost. They hear the call to mastery, but keep falling into the same reactions, the same temptations, the same mental spirals, not because they're weak, but because they've never been taught how to fight back the right way. The Stoics didn't just talk about control, they practiced it daily, quietly, strategically. They developed inner tools not for show, but for survival, for clarity, for freedom, for strength under pressure. So now that we've uncovered the 4 forces you must learn to govern, your mouth, your mood, your money, and your mind, it's time to go deeper, into application, into daily training, into 7 timeless strategies the Stoics used to transform philosophy into practice. These aren't tricks. These aren't hacks. They are habits of the mind, frames of focus, anchors of discipline. And when practiced the right way, they don't just help you survive the chaos. They help you rise above it, calm, clear, and completely in command of yourself. Let's begin with Strategy 1. Strategy 1. Rewire the first response. You've probably been there. Someone says the wrong thing, looks at you the wrong way, questions your effort, your intention, your identity, and in less than 3 seconds, your whole body tenses, the pulse rises, the breath shortens, the words sharpen. That one look, that one tone, that one tiny disrespect lights up every wire of frustration inside you. And before reason can step in, you've already said something you regret, done something you can't undo. That's the danger of the untrained mind. It doesn't ask questions, it reacts. It doesn't see reality, it sees threat. And it doesn't protect your peace, it hands it over to the moment. The Stoics understood this better than anyone. Seneca warned, "The greatest remedy for anger is delay." In other words, your first reaction is rarely the right one, because the first response is the emotional one, and emotion is fast, messy, unfiltered. But the right way is slower, more deliberate. It gives space for the soul to lead instead of the ego. Let me tell you a story. Daniel was one of those rare employees everyone quietly respected. He wasn't loud, but he was reliable. For 3 years, he built trust in a place where trust was earned inch by inch. He arrived early, stayed focused, supported his team without demanding credit. He was the calm in the chaos. Until one afternoon. That day started like any other. Coffee, emails, the usual. But tension had been building behind the scenes. A sick parent, a late paycheck, a project on the verge of falling apart. And during a weekly meeting, his junior colleague presented an idea Daniel had spent weeks refining. No mention of his contribution, no shared credit, just slide after slide, as if Daniel never existed. At first he clenched his jaw, then he adjusted his seat. Then, without meaning to, he interrupted. His voice cracked with frustration, his tone sharper than he realized. "That's not how we agreed to present it." The room froze. The presenter looked shaken. The manager looked disappointed. Daniel was right, but it didn't matter. In the span of 30 seconds, 3 years of quiet credibility started to fracture. You see, Daniel didn't lose because he was wrong. He lost because he reacted before he reflected. He let emotion take the first move, and reason never got a turn. And this is what we all must learn. You can win the point and still lose the game. You can speak truth, but if it's delivered without discipline, it gets dismissed as noise. Even worse, it costs you something real. Marcus Aurelius once said, "When you are offended at any man's fault, turn to yourself and study your own failings. Then you will forget your anger." That's not weakness, that's perspective. Because control isn't about suppression, it's about elevation. It's about rising above the knee-jerk response and choosing not just what to say, but when and how. And that takes practice. The Stoic approach is simple but powerful. Delay, detach, direct. First, you delay. Just one breath, just 3 seconds. just enough to stop the flood from becoming a fire. That breath is the break in the chain of reactivity. It's the moment where you move from automatic to intentional. Second, you detach. You step back from the moment emotionally. You ask, what's really happening here? Is this about me, or is this about their fear, their pressure, their blind spot? Detachment isn't distance, it's clarity. And third, you direct. You choose your next move based on principle, not pride. You speak if it serves. You stay silent if it stabilizes. You act only when the action reflects who you are, not who the moment is trying to turn you into. This is what it means to rewire the first response, to build a new default. One that isn't fast, but strong. One that doesn't just protect your image, but your integrity. But don't mistake silence for surrender. A Stoic doesn't hold back because he's weak. He holds back because he's grounded. His silence isn't submission, it's a sword. He uses it as a weapon, not a weakness. Because when everyone is shouting, the one who chooses quiet becomes magnetic. And in a room full of reaction, restraint commands the most attention. Let's bring it home. You can't control the insults, the surprises, the disrespect, but you can control the space between stimulus and response. That space is where your power lives. That space is where wisdom breathes. And that space, if trained, can protect your peace like armor. So the next time someone tests you, don't ask, what do they deserve? Ask, what do I want to become in this moment? Because life will always present the trigger. But you choose whether to pull it. Rewiring the first response isn't about being passive. It's about being precise. It's about owning the moment instead of being owned by it. It's about leading with silence and letting your presence speak louder than any reaction ever could. And when you master that space, when you delay, detach, and direct, you won't just avoid damage. You'll build something far more valuable, unshakable inner control. If you value this kind of clarity and want to keep sharpening your inner edge, consider subscribing. These lessons don't just end here, they build on each other. Now let's move to the second strategy, because once you've trained your first response, the next battlefield is the voice that whispers behind every doubt, every delay, every fear. It's time to confront the hidden thoughts that shape your entire reality. Strategy 2. Speak only when silence fails. There's a moment we've all lived through when someone says something wrong, unfair, or even foolish, and you feel that pull to speak. Your heart beats faster. Your tongue presses against the back of your teeth. You want to correct, to defend, to express. But something inside tells you, not yet, not now, not like this. Most people don't pause there. They burst. Words pour out, justified or not, helpful or not, because for them, talking feels like power. But for the Stoic, restraint is the real weapon. The Stoics understood the immense force hidden in words. Seneca once said, "Speech should be allotted more carefully than wealth." Marcus Aurelius echoed it when he wrote, "You always own the option of having no opinion. There is never a need to say something." In their world, speech was not filler, it was force. And like any force, it must be aimed, not sprayed. Let's break something down. There are 3 types of people when it comes to speaking. The first speaks to release. These are the ones who dump every emotion the moment it appears. They vent, gossip, complain, argue, not to solve, but to soothe. Talking is their escape hatch. But what they call relief is often just noise. They may feel better in the moment, but they leave behind confusion, tension, and often regret. The second type speaks to win. Their words are weapons sharpened for debate. They interrupt, correct, dominate conversations. They don't just want to be heard, They want to be right. But here's the thing, even when they win, they lose. Because in proving someone wrong, they reveal their own insecurity. The louder they are, the more fragile they seem. They confuse volume with value, and when you speak just to overpower, people remember your aggression, not your insight. Then there's the third kind, rare, quiet, powerful. They speak only when silence fails. Their words are slow, measured, intentional. They don't speak to release or to win. They speak to direct, to bring clarity, to guide. And when they do speak, people listen, not because of what they say, but because of how rare it is that they say anything at all. Their silence builds gravity. Their presence makes noise irrelevant. This is the Stoic way. And it doesn't come naturally in today's world. We live in a time of commentary overload. Everyone has an opinion, and most are delivered without pause or purpose. Social media trains us to react fast, speak first, and worry about consequences later. But here's the truth. Just because you have something to say doesn't mean it needs to be said. The right way is not to suppress your voice, but to refine it, to speak less, but mean more. Let me share a story. Malik was a mid-level leader at a large company. He wasn't flashy, but he was deeply respected. The CEO once said, "Malik speaks 5 times a month, but when he does, everyone stops talking." One day during a heated internal meeting, teams were arguing over a failed product launch. Fingers were being pointed, voices were raised. People defended their work with passion and ego. Malik sat back, quiet. He watched. He took notes. And when things were about to spiral completely, he leaned forward and spoke one sentence. "We're blaming each other, but no one's fixing the system." Silence, then nods. The entire energy in the room shifted. Not because he yelled, not because he quoted data, but because he spoke the right way, at the right moment, with the right weight. He wasn't trying to be right. He was trying to realign the room. That's influence without noise. That's wisdom with precision. So how do we train that kind of speech? First, we pause before we speak. Ask, is this necessary? Is this true? Will it help? Second, we speak from stillness, not from spike. If your heart rate is up, your words are not ready. Give them space. Let your thoughts mature in silence before you hand them to the world. Third, we speak to elevate, not to dominate. Your words should build something, even if it's just understanding. And finally, we rewrite our inner speech. Because how you speak to others always reflects how you speak to yourself. If your internal monologue is anxious, judgmental, or scattered, your outer language will follow. Practice silence inside first. Clean up your inner tone. Make your thoughts align with calmness, not chaos. That way, when your words do emerge, they'll mirror your discipline, not your disorder. In this way, your speech becomes an extension of your inner world. You no longer speak because you're uncomfortable with silence. You speak because the silence has done its job, and now it's time to move. You speak when it serves clarity, not your pride. That's what it means to speak only when silence fails. And remember, your words are like arrows. Once released, they cannot return. So hold each one as if it carries weight, because it does. In time, you'll find that fewer words hold more power, and more silence holds deeper presence. Control your tongue, not by locking it, but by training it to serve something higher. Speak only when silence cannot carry the truth alone. That is the right way. Now, once your words are sharpened and your tongue is tamed, the next battlefield is where all your reactions are born, your emotional core. Let's move to the third strategy, how to turn your emotions from saboteurs into allies. Strategy 3. Control mood with ritual, not willpower. Have you ever woken up feeling off before the day even begins? Nothing dramatic happened, no big argument, no sudden tragedy, but something's just heavy. The air feels dense, your chest tightens, and within minutes you're impatient with your family, annoyed by traffic, distracted at work, all because your mood took the wheel before your mind even got in the car. This is how most people live. They treat their mood like weather, unpredictable, uncontrollable, just something to survive. But what if I told you that your mood isn't the weather? It's the climate you quietly allow. And if you don't set it with discipline, it will set you up for self-sabotage. The Stoics knew this. Epictetus warned, "No man is free who is not master of himself." And mastery doesn't come from trying harder. It comes from training smarter. Let me explain. People think they can conquer emotion with raw willpower. I won't get mad today. I'll stay calm, no matter what. But that's like standing on the beach and trying to yell the tide back. You don't stop a storm by arguing with the clouds. You don't fix mood by brute force. You anchor yourself in something deeper. This is where ritual comes in. Mood isn't random. It's responsive. It reflects what you feed it, what you repeat, what you ignore. If your mornings start with chaos, if your mind is filled with noise before you even stand up, if your body hasn't moved, if your thoughts haven't been cleaned, of course your mood will default to stress. That's not emotion. That's the cost of neglect. Let me tell you a story. Erica was a high performer, manager at a tech firm, 2 kids, a full life. But every week she would crash. Mood swings, sudden anxiety, burnout by Thursday. She blamed hormones, traffic, co-workers, the news. Until one morning her therapist asked, "What's the first thing you do when you wake up?" She said, "I check my phone." The therapist nodded. Before you've spoken to your kids, touched the earth, or even breathed, you're already reacting to the world, and now your day is chasing your chemistry, not your clarity. That hit her. So she tried something new. She built what she called her 5-minute dignity loop. Before touching her phone, she did 3 things: stood barefoot for 30 seconds and breathed deeply, named the emotion she felt without judgment, then wrote 1 sentence of gratitude, just 1. And from that small ritual, everything changed. She didn't eliminate stress, but she stopped letting it own her. That's the right way. Not perfection, but preparation. Not forcing emotion, but framing it. The Stoics practiced this too. Marcus Aurelius wrote each morning as a reminder to himself, "You will meet people today who are rude, ungrateful, arrogant, deceitful." Why? Not to complain, but to prepare. To create a mental buffer before the arrows flew. This was his ritual, preloading his mind with calm before the world gave him chaos. You see, you don't control how people act. You control how you meet them. You don't control the wind. You set the sail. Now, let's get practical. There are a few Stoic strategies that help anchor your mood with consistency. First, morning anchoring. Before the phone, the emails, the news, create a quiet moment. Journal, breathe, repeat a principle. Not for motivation, but for alignment. This is you stepping into the world with centered intention, not scattered reaction. Second, naming emotion. Neuroscience backs what the Stoics intuited. When you label what you feel, you loosen its grip. You go from "I am angry" to "I feel anger." That subtle shift gives you distance, and in that distance you choose. Say it silently. This is frustration. This is fear. This is fatigue. And then ask, what does this emotion want me to know? Not control. You're not silencing it. You're translating it. Third, shift the spotlight. Gratitude isn't fluffy. It's functional. When your mind focuses on what's lacking, everything feels like an attack. But when you practice seeing what remains, what endures, what uplifts, you don't deny hardship. You just stop being ruled by it. Try this. In your lowest moment, ask yourself, what's still working? Even if the answer is, I can still breathe, that's a start, because clarity begins with something solid. Next tool, mood audit. At midday and end of day, ask, what mood have I carried most? Be honest. If it's irritation, ask where it began. If it's joy, ask what supported it. This isn't judgment, it's data. When you notice patterns, you reclaim control. Then there's the breath reset. You don't need an app, you need awareness. When your mood dips, close your eyes. Inhale slowly through the nose for 4 counts. Hold for 4. Exhale through the mouth for 6. Repeat 3 times. This resets your nervous system. Your body listens before your mind does. And finally, the 5-minute dignity loop. It's simple. 1 minute of stillness, 1 sentence of self-reminder, 1 emotion named, 1 gratitude noted, 1 promise made. That's it. Done daily, it becomes armor. Because your mood doesn't need a miracle. It needs rhythm, structure, a standard. Because here's the truth. Emotional chaos isn't always a sign of trauma. Sometimes it's just a sign of no routine, no rhythm, no rituals, and the man or woman who waits until chaos to find their center will always be late. But the one who builds it quietly, daily, faithfully, that person meets the world with stillness, not because life is calm, but because they are. So if you want to control your mood, stop waiting for the storm to stop. Start preparing your structure. Create rituals that hold you steady when your emotions try to pull you apart. That is the right way, not reaction, but routine. Not pressure, but preparation. Not force, but philosophy. And once you build that emotional foundation, the next battlefield is the one most people avoid. It's the invisible war that takes place in how we handle our time, our energy, and especially our resources. Let's move to the 4th strategy, how to build financial freedom from the inside out. Strategy 4. Train the mind to observe, not obey. Have you ever had a thought so loud it shaped your entire day? Not because it was true, but because you believed it without question. Maybe it sounded like this: I'm not ready, they don't like me, I always mess things up, nothing will ever change. And just like that, you adjusted your posture, softened your ambition, sabotaged your opportunity, and called it instinct. But it wasn't instinct, it was programming. And your mind was running the script on autopilot. The Stoics were painfully aware of this pattern. Epictetus said, "It's not things that disturb us, but our judgments about things." Marcus Aurelius wrote, "You have power over your mind, not outside events." Realize this, and you will find strength. Notice the pattern? They weren't warning you about the world. They were warning you about your interpretation of it. Because the greatest danger is not the event itself, it's the meaning you assign to it. Let me tell you about Thomas. He wasn't weak, he wasn't lazy, but every time he got close to a breakthrough, pitching his ideas, stepping into new rooms, trying something unfamiliar, his mind whispered, "Not you, not yet." So he'd stall, overthink, second guess, tell himself it was strategy, when really it was fear wearing a mask called logic. It wasn't until he started writing down his thoughts every morning for 10 minutes that he saw it for what it was, a looping story. One he didn't choose but had rehearsed so many times it felt like truth. Your mind is not a mirror of reality, it's a projector. And if you never question the film, you'll live out a drama you didn't even write. That's why Stoic practice begins with observation. Not silence, not suppression, observation. It's the art of seeing clearly without obeying blindly. So how do you do it the right way? Start by recognizing that the mind is like a room. Leave it unchecked, and it fills with clutter. Regret in one corner, worry in another. Half-finished conversations, imagined arguments, fears that never belonged to you in the first place. You don't need to fight the chaos. You just need to clean the space. Daily, intentionally. First ritual, reflective journaling. This isn't about poetry. It's about precision. Sit with your mind and ask, what thoughts am I carrying that didn't come from truth? Write them down. Separate fact from fiction. You might discover most of your stress comes from rehearsing outcomes that haven't even happened. This isn't therapy, it's training. Seneca said, "We suffer more in imagination than in reality." Journaling is how you expose the imagination before it imprisons you. Second practice, thought auditing. Throughout your day, pause. Catch a thought midstream and interrogate it. Ask, is this fact, fear, or fiction? For example, you walk into a room and think, they don't respect me. Pause. Is that a fact you verified, or a fear your past whispered, or a fiction your ego created? When you start doing this often enough, your mind stops being your master and starts becoming your tool. You stop obeying every mental headline like it's divine truth. You begin to lead your thoughts, not follow them. Third discipline, fasting from noise. In today's world, silence is an endangered species, and that's not a poetic problem, it's a neurological one. Your brain is overloaded. Voices from social media, headlines, notifications, ads, opinions. You scroll, you absorb, you react, until you mistake external chaos for internal truth. The Stoics prized solitude, not isolation. Solitude. The difference? One is escape. The other is engagement with your highest self. So take a break from the feed, 1 day a week. 1 hour a morning, 1 evening without screens, not to be offline, but to be present, to hear your own mind before the world fills it for you. Let me return to Thomas. After 3 weeks of daily journaling and short noise fasts, he started catching himself mid-thought. He didn't silence the doubt. He met it. One morning, as he stood outside a big client meeting, that old thought came back. They won't take you seriously. But this time, he smiled. Not because it disappeared, but because he recognized it. Ah, there's that fiction again. He walked in anyway, delivered anyway. And for the first time, his courage wasn't perfect, but it was present. That's the right way. Not pretending the mind is pure, but treating it as a landscape you learn to navigate. Not to silence the storm, but to stop giving it your ship. Now here's the truth most people avoid. Controlling your mind doesn't mean suppressing every negative thought. It means noticing them before they become decisions. You can feel doubt and still move forward. You can hear fear and still choose truth. The Stoic mind doesn't chase constant positivity. It trains constant awareness. So the next time a thought shows up uninvited, don't panic. Invite it in. Ask where it came from. Ask what it wants. And ask whether it's building the life you want or just replaying the life you've outgrown. Because the one who trains the mind to observe instead of obey doesn't become emotionless. He becomes unshakable. Now, once the mind is clean and the mood is anchored, the next test of self-mastery lies in a space that most people waste without ever noticing, and that space is silence. But not just external quiet, the kind of silence that becomes your signal. Let's move to the next strategy. Strategy 5. Turn your wallet into a weapon of freedom. Have you ever bought something just to feel in control again? Not because you needed it, not even because you truly wanted it, but because for one brief moment, the swipe of a card felt like power. We've all done it. You're tired, overwhelmed, maybe insecure after a long day. Then the ad shows up, the sale, the praise-filled influencer. You click, you buy, you tell yourself it's just a treat, just this once. But when the dopamine fades, what's left isn't satisfaction. It's the subtle erosion of self-command. Here's the thing, money doesn't lie, it reveals. It reveals where your values live, where your discipline leaks, and whether your identity is grounded in substance or propped up by impulse. Epictetus said, "Wealth consists not in having great possessions, but in having few wants." That's not just financial advice, that's a spiritual framework. Because when your wallet becomes a tool for self-expression rather than self-control, you're no longer spending dollars, you're spending dignity. And true stoicism doesn't measure a man by what he earns, but by what he can walk away from. Let me tell you a story about Julian. He wasn't rich, but he earned enough. What drained him wasn't poverty, it was his pursuit of appearances. Every weekend he'd buy new things, shoes, gadgets, meals he couldn't pronounce, not because he loved them, but because he feared looking small. His friends called it lifestyle, but behind the designer jacket and the leased car, he couldn't sleep, not because of guilt, because of fear. One market dip, one emergency, and everything would crumble. And it did. When the company downsized, he wasn't just jobless, he was powerless, because every cent had been a performance, every decision a negotiation with ego. Now contrast that with a Stoic approach to money. In this path, your wallet isn't a stage. It's a shield, it's a strategy, it's quiet power. You don't spend to impress, you spend to secure. You don't consume to escape discomfort, you invest to build resilience. That's the right way, not flashy, but free. So how do you turn your finances into a force for inner peace? First, build spending rules, not emotional guesses, actual rules. For example, I never buy on the first urge. I sleep on purchases over a certain amount. Every dollar must serve one of three missions: stability, growth, or generosity. These aren't restrictions, they're revelations. They show you what actually matters, because discipline isn't punishment, it's clarity. Second, practice impulse delay. When you feel the urge to buy, pause, breathe. Ask, is this for my ego or is this for my escape? 9 times out of 10, you'll see it's neither about need nor joy. It's about avoidance. And what Stoicism teaches us is that avoidance is the most expensive thing a man can buy, because it costs you not just money, but self-trust. Third, invest mindfully, not just in markets or material assets, but in mindset, in skill, in stillness. Save not just for retirement, but for integrity. So when life punches you in the face, and it will, you're not forced to betray your peace, just to pay your bills. Seneca said, "It is not the man who has too little, but the man who craves more, that is poor." Investing isn't just for the wealthy, it's for the wise. It's the art of planting today what your future self will thank you for, not just in your bank account, but in your character. Let's return to Julian. After the fall, he started small. He sold what didn't serve him. He created a simple spending system. Every Sunday he'd sit with his finances, not to feel guilt, but to feel grounded. He tracked not just dollars, but decisions. Each time he chose patience over pleasure, clarity over chaos, he wrote it down. At first, it felt empty. No shopping highs. No compliments from strangers. But over time, he noticed something deeper. He slept better. He walked straighter. And the next time opportunity came knocking, he had something most men don't: freedom. Not because he had more, but because he finally needed less. That's the right way. Not survival, sovereignty. Let's be honest, most people don't have a money problem. They have a prove myself problem, a validate me problem, a let me feel better without facing my emptiness problem. But the Stoic man doesn't feed the hole. He heals it through simplicity, through structure, through sober awareness that nothing you buy can replace the man you become. So here's your practice. Before every transaction, pause. Ask yourself, is this a reward or is this relief? If it's reward, wait a day. If it's relief, wait a week. Because what you delay reveals what you depend on. Also try this. Once a week, audit your week's spending, not to shame yourself, but to ask one honest question. Did this move me closer to peace or pull me deeper into noise? If you're brave enough to do this, you'll begin to see your wallet not as a source of pressure, but as a mirror. A mirror of whether you live by reaction or by principle. Because in the end, financial freedom is not about getting rich. It's about removing the leash. When you stop needing validation, when you stop outsourcing identity to the price tag, you move differently, quietly, intentionally, unapologetically. And that's the hidden gift of this discipline. You no longer spend your way into chaos. You build your way into calm. Let's carry this calm forward. Because once your wallet no longer owns you, you're ready to walk into the world with a different posture. A quiet dignity. One rooted not in what you show, but in what you've silently mastered. And that takes us to the next strategy, where self-respect meets silence. Strategy 6. Shape your identity. Through consistency, not emotion. Have you ever told yourself you were going to change and you really meant it, but then a week later you slipped right back into the same pattern? Maybe you told yourself you'd be more focused, more calm, more disciplined. But then the stress hit, the excuses started whispering, and the motivation vanished. That's the problem. Most people build their lives on emotion, not consistency. They chase identity through moments of intensity instead of years of repetition. Seneca warned us, fate leads the willing and drags the unwilling. But what he meant wasn't just about external events, it was about our habits. You're either being led by discipline or dragged by emotion. You either decide who you are each day by what you do, or you let your feelings choose for you. And let's be honest, feelings are fickle. They're loud when you're comfortable, silent when you suffer. They tell you to quit when it's hard and lie to you when it's easy. The Stoics believed that who you are is revealed in repetition, not inspiration. It's not how you feel about being disciplined, it's whether you acted with discipline today. That's the right way. Not flashy, not dramatic, just deeply steady. Let me give you a story. There was a man named Elias. He wasn't born extraordinary. In fact, he often felt weak. He lacked confidence. He struggled with self-respect. But one day, standing in front of the mirror, he did something different. He didn't yell at himself. He didn't give a fiery speech. He whispered a phrase, "I am a man of precision." He said it before his morning routine, and then he acted on it. He folded his towel carefully. He drank water slowly. He made his bed with tight corners. At work, he reviewed every sentence before hitting send. In conversation, he listened more than he spoke. One tiny action at a time, he embodied that phrase. And here's the key. He didn't do it when he felt good. He did it even when he didn't, especially when he didn't. That's what built the change, not emotion, but evidence. Repeated proof, until eventually he didn't have to say it anymore. People began to reflect it back to him. You're sharp. You're reliable. You're consistent. Not because he tried to impress, but because identity, the Stoic way, is crafted through quiet patterns, not loud declarations. Here's what most people get wrong. They try to become someone new by thinking differently, but thinking doesn't stick without action. You can't meditate your way into being courageous without doing courageous things. You can't journal your way into being focused unless your schedule reflects it. Identity isn't a theory, it's a track record. The Stoics lived this truth. Epictetus didn't preach discipline, he practiced it. Marcus Aurelius didn't talk about responsibility, he wrote his principles and lived them before dawn. They understood that your soul becomes dyed with the color of your daily thoughts, but it is cemented through your repeated deeds. So how do you shape identity the right way? First, pick one trait, just one, not a dozen affirmations. One, choose something simple but precise. I'm a man of calm. I'm a woman of resilience. I'm someone who finishes what I start. Then, every morning, whisper it to yourself, not as a promise, but as a practice. Second, pick one action to match. If you say you are a man of calm, then pause 3 seconds before every reply. If you say you are disciplined, wake up with your alarm and make your bed. Not because making your bed will change your life, but because it proves that your words are backed by effort. Third, repeat it, not just when you feel like it, especially when you don't. Because every time you act against your mood in favor of your principles, you reinforce that identity. You build a psychological spine, and over time, that spine starts to define you. Let me be clear, this isn't about perfection. You'll fail, you'll forget, you'll slip. That's not weakness, that's reality. The only thing that matters is that you return, again and again, because the Stoic path isn't about how perfectly you start. It's about how faithfully you return. This is how warriors are built in silence, through invisible acts that no one sees, through daily decisions that seem small but shape something enormous. And eventually you'll wake up one day and realize you don't need to say who you are, you just live it. And when others ask how you became so steady, so grounded, so yourself, you'll smile. Because you know you built it the right way. Now, let's move forward and talk about what to do when others try to rattle that identity you've worked so hard to earn. Strategy 7. Live as if watched by your highest self. Have you ever paused in the middle of a decision and thought, not what would people think, but what would the best version of me think? That quiet, internal voice that doesn't shout, doesn't guilt, doesn't beg for approval. It just watches, and it always knows. The Stoics believed every person carries within them a fragment of the divine, what they called logos, the rational principle of the universe. Marcus Aurelius said, "Live as if you were to die tomorrow, yet build as if you will live forever." In those few words, he taught us how to balance presence with purpose, urgency with endurance, today with eternity. Because to the Stoic, the highest self is not some fantasy figure. It's the silent judge inside you, the witness that watches everything, especially when no one else is around. Now imagine this. A man sits alone at night scrolling his phone, tempted to message someone he knows he shouldn't. No one would know. It's late. He's tired. He's lonely. His mind spins justifications. But then he pauses, not because someone's watching, but because someone is, his future self, the man he's trying to become. And in that pause, he chooses not to betray that man. That's what it means to live as if watched by your highest self. We all have moments like this, moments where no one is holding us accountable, no applause, no punishment, just the internal choice between weakness and wisdom. That is the battlefield where the Stoic sharpens his sword. Not in the spotlight, but in the quiet corners of daily life where integrity is born or lost. When you live this way, consciously, deliberately, reverently, you don't need external discipline because internal vision governs you. You don't cut corners not because someone said you shouldn't, but because the man you're becoming wouldn't. You don't lie, not because it's immoral, but because truth is your spine, and bending it weakens the structure of your being. The Stoics never sought perfection. They sought alignment, a unity between thought, word, and action. They knew that the right way isn't always easy, but it's always clean. It's the path that, when you walk it, leaves no regrets behind you and no self-contempt within you. Because at the end of the day, the one person you can't escape is yourself. Seneca once wrote, "We should every night call ourselves to an account." That's not self-shaming. That's self-respect, a mental audit. Did I live today in a way that honored the man I claim to be? Did I speak with clarity, act with courage, hold the line when no one else was looking? If not, don't lie about it. Don't spiral in guilt. Just tighten the armor and try again. Because progress, real progress, is not found in intensity. It's found in repetition. That's the discipline of living under observation, not from others, but from the wiser version of yourself. The one who speaks few words, but holds you to the highest ones. And every time you choose principle over comfort, patience over impulse, clarity over chaos, you come closer to becoming him. So when life tests you, when temptation whispers, when shortcuts seduce you, stop and ask, what would the wisest version of me do right now? Then do that. Not for applause, not for pride, but because you know deep down it's the right way. And when you live like that, you stop chasing power, because you've already earned something greater, peace with the man in the mirror. Let this be your final anchor. Let your highest self be your standard. And when in doubt, don't look around. Look up toward the future you who's already watching. Let's bring it all together now. What if the battle was never out there? What if the real power came from knowing when to stay silent, when to pause, when to walk away, and when to rise above? You've just seen that true strength doesn't shout. It doesn't seek permission or chase noise. It builds quietly, in the way you speak, think, feel, and choose. And every time you take back control from chaos, you're not just surviving, you're shaping a life that reflects the man you were meant to become. So take this with you. Let your discipline be your defense. Let your calm be your rebellion. And when the world gets loud, return to the simple truth. You are always being watched by the highest version of you. Make him proud. If this message stayed with you, consider subscribing so you never miss the next chapter, and drop a simple comment below. Inner power. Your journey is just beginning, and the next lesson might be the one that